Radio WRVA, the voice of Virginia.
All right, it's 7:04 this morning here on Richmond's Morning News. I'm Rich. Thanks for joining us this morning on the Voice of Virginia News Radio WRVA. So a big vote last night at Richmond City Hall. But I want to rewind just a little bit before that. And I really want to get your reaction today on the James River Air text line, 833-804-1140, 833-804-1140. So let me recap where we are. For those of you just tuning in today, Richmond Public Schools, RPS, led by Superintendent Camus. And he's been invited on the show and didn't respond to our invitation to come on the show because I have some questions I want to ask. I think they're legitimate questions. So a couple things went on at the same time. Number one, do you remember when we were talking about the budget process and how long it was taking and how we thought we were being held up because Louise Lucas wanted to find a piggy bank to raid for an extra $100 million and whatever she was looking for? $1.2 billion, I think, is what it ended up being, that they needed to find extra money. So they looked for ways to raid the data centers to pay for the money for the things they wanted, like making temporary Obamacare subsidies available for people. Remember those temporary subsidies, which were emergency during COVID. Virginia extended those out off the backs of the budget. And then they had a couple $100 million they put aside to fight Donald Trump, and they had some rainy day slush fund, all that stuff the General Assembly did. Well, in order to do all that, and it turned out the real reason why our budget was so late was because of the retail marijuana shops that they're setting up for next year, and I'm not done on those yet. So the budget gets there at the last possible minute. We don't have a government shutdown, but the budget is really, really late. Well, if you listen to this radio show, you kind of knew that the budget wasn't going to come in on time and it was going to go down to the wire, right? That's why when we tell you, either wake up with Rich or play catch up all day. So obviously the Richmond Public School District doesn't pay attention to what we say on this radio show because they went rolling down the street, whistling a happy tune, and they decided to put out their own budget without seeing how much money they were going to get from the state. So the Richmond Public Schools did their own budget analysis and their own budget forecast, and they decided we're going to spend X amount of dollars, and that's our budget. That sounds like a conversation my wife and I have all the time. Honey, I've decided I'm going to go spend this. And then she goes, well, honey, guess what? We don't have the money to do that. I've decided I'm going to put together this budget for our household, which means I'm going to get all of this stuff that I want. And then she goes, that's great. How are you going to pay for it? Darn. I can't have a 105-inch plasma television in front of my house. I can't buy a new Cybertruck. And I can't have a new swimming pool today that I really wanted because it was in my budget that I made up. And she says, how are we going to fund all of that? And we're renting, dummy. You can't put a pool in the backyard. You don't own this house. Oh, okay, never mind. Unfortunately, the Richmond Public School doesn't know how to say never mind because they put together a budget. Jeffrey Camus, who's the superintendent, put out a budget that had their projections of what they thought their budget was going to be. And it turns out the state, in their tardiness, gave them less money than the RPS really thought they were going to get. So let me make sure everybody understands this. RPS goes running down the hallway with scissors saying we're going to get this much money for our budget, but they don't know where those funds are coming from. But that's what we're going to have. And now they project it as a shortfall that they're going out to the city going, hi, our budget projections don't work, so we want another $8.6 million, I think is what they're asking for. So my big question is, before you ask us to raise our taxes, RPS, can somebody explain to me how your budget process works, where you just projected money that you didn't know you were going to have, and then say that's a budget shortfall, to me, that's mismanagement. To me, that's a miscalculation. And to me, somebody needs to be accountable for that. But instead, you are going to dump this on all of us because you don't know how to project what your budget should be and what your revenues should be that are coming in to pay for that budget. You just said, here's what we're going to do. Here's what we're going to have. We're just going to have central planning to decide this is how much money we're going to spend on the school district, whether we know we have those funds or not. And when we don't have those funds, we're going to ask the taxpayers to give us a 1% sales tax increase. There's two people that need to be held accountable for this. Number one, the governor and the General Assembly. Why did it take us so long to get us our budget for this Commonwealth? Because you see what happened when you're messing around. These people are now coming up short. You should have had this budget in a long time ago, and that way Richmond Public Schools and all the rest, they were counting on you to tell them what kind of budget you were going to give them and how much revenue they were going to get from the state, could actually make accurate forecasts of what they were going to have. So the governor, General Assembly, that's on you. Now let me go back over to RPS for a minute. You come up with a poor projection and a forecast that it seems like you just kind of pull out of thin air. Jeffrey Camus and the folks over there that put together the budgets, how did you come up with those dollar numbers of what you thought you were going to get from the state, and how are they so off? Did you just project, well, here's what I think the state will give me, and I pulled the number out of thin air, and that's what I threw in my budget? Believe me, if we would do that in business, if I would do that in any of the companies I worked for, I'd probably be looking for a new job if I forecasted that poorly. I don't know. Let me ask any of you that are in business, or let me ask you for your household budgets. If you were forecasting what your budget would be and you just made up a number and it didn't come true, what would happen? I'd probably pull back and wouldn't spend so much money. What do? Hi, we're just going to give this anyway. We're going to plan out what we want, what we need. We're going to central plan the budget for the school district and then expect everybody else to somehow make that money appear. So that's one, that's two. Three, how about this one? Odie Donald said last night the sales tax was chosen as the one to increase because 45% of the money that will be collected by this 1% sales tax increase come from people who do not live in Richmond. Let me try that on for size. The sales tax was chosen as one to increase because around 45% is paid by people who do not live in Richmond. So Jeffrey Camus and the school district had such a poor forecast. You're going to impose a sales tax upon people. 45% of them don't live in Richmond, and that's how you're going to balance the school budget. Wow. How many different broken things are there in that sentence right there? Oh, and by the way, let's not let the General Assembly and the governor off the hook, because they knew what they were doing when they changed the rules. That you don't have to go before the General Assembly to increase your local sales tax. You could do it on your own with a simple vote of the city council. So now you're going to be asked to increase the sales tax 1%, $56 million extra will be raised. By the way, I thought the budget shortfall was only 8.6 million, and now you want 56 million, which you say will be used for buildings and the rest. Do you feel like somebody's playing a shell game with you? Because that's what I feel like. I'd like to know from the Richmond Public School District, how did you forecast so poorly that you're $8.6 million short? Did you just decide here's what we're going to spend without knowing what the budget was going to be? Did you just simply put together your wish list of how you think your budget should operate, whether the reality of whether those funds are going to be available or not? Because that sounds like what you did. And to the governor and the General Assembly, do you see the mess that you caused by waiting so long to get our budget done while you were messing around with raiding the piggy bank to give Louise Lucas what she wanted so you could have a slush fund to fight Donald Trump? Real world problems have now arisen because of what you've done in the General Assembly and all your ideas of we're going to push back against Trump, we're going to fight against Trump. I actually have a slush fund of several $100 million that the state has right now to fight against future Trump administration initiatives. It's just sitting there as a slush fund. Who knows what's going to happen to that money? But I know what that money could have gone to. It could have gone to the Richmond Public Schools. It could have gone to Powhatan. It could have gone to Chesterfield. So they won't raise our sales tax 1%. And by the way, you want to talk about what a big scam this is? If I'm only 8.6 million short, why is it that you're going to raise $54 million or whatever that is? And this is going to be a sales tax that will go on infinitum. So much poor leadership here. But it all boils down to the General Assembly and the governor. While they were playing games with the budget, you and I are going to suffer and have to pay 1% increase in sales tax because who's going to vote against funding the schools? And for the school districts, really, your forecast is that awful that you came up that short and just assumed somebody would give you the money? There's something fundamentally wrong with that all the way around. I'd love to hear what you have to say, Richmond. 833-804-1140. 833-804-1140. The school district needs to explain why their forecast was so poorly written that we're now being forced to consider raising our sales taxes. And by the way, that money will come from people to pay for Richmond Public Schools that don't even live in Richmond. Wow. How about that? Number for you to join us, 833-804-1140, 833-804-1140. You know the one person who won't blame for this is the mayor. By the way, he's coming on the show on Thursday. The mayor just had this dropped into his lap, as they did in Chesterfield and as they have in Powhatan. If the school districts have that kind of issue, and I got to look into more with why they're doing it in Chesterfield and Powhatan, but I know right now I can look at Richmond Public Schools. You made your problem everyone else's problem. Somebody from the school district should explain. Number for you to join us, 833-804-1140. And if you're a member of, if you vote in Richmond, you're going to have to decide whether you want to increase this. If you don't vote in Richmond, you should be outraged because someone else's poor work is now going to cost you every time you buy something in Richmond. 833-804-1140. All right, today's program brought to you in part by GreerFinancialGroup.com.